How big of a concern is depth for the Panthers as they head into week 2 of the preseason? I'll answer that question among other listener questions in this weekly Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. Why? Because the weekly Wednesday mailbag is back here throughout the entirety of the regular season. Started off earlier this year because Fridays, a lot going on. Didn't want to ignore your questions. So let's go ahead and do it starting today, the weekly Wednesday mailbag, all the way up until the second week of January. And who knows, maybe until the beginning of February if something happens here in Carolina that we don't expect, but we'd love to see. Then we'll shift back in the offseason to the weekly Friday mailbag. Either way, at me or DM me. But of course, follow me first on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. As I said, the weekly let me not mess this up. The weekly Wednesday mailbag is back here on Locked On Panthers, as I already botched that attempt. So let's go ahead and get into it. And hopefully I will not botch answering these questions the way that you may want me to answer these questions, even though I'm always going to tell you my true feelings about this team and where they are headed. Starting off with Mark this week, who asked, my takeaway from the first preseason game was that we may not have as much need for another cornerback and outside linebacker as the media is saying. Is that me? Am I the media, Mark? However, we have a huge need for offensive tackle and center depth. Do you think the Panthers coaches management see this the same way? I do. I think the corners have played pretty well, considering a lot of hand-wringing and concern about that position group heading into training camp and still heading into the season. J.C. Horn is a big part of that. We cannot sit here and confidently say, based off of the first 3 seasons, that J.C. Horn is going to be available for the vast majority of the season. You just cannot sit there and say that. Now, because you have that understanding that JC in the past has gotten injured, which does not mean because he's gotten injured in the past that will happen again this year, but you have to account for that possibility because that has just been the reality here in Carolina. Thinking about that potentially being a reality again in 2024, what do they have depth-wise to help them? Well, they have their second corner opposite of J.C. Horn and Dane Jackson, who was the number 3 corner the last couple of years in Buffalo, who does have starting experience and has played in more meaningful games than J.C. Horn has ever played in, because J.C. Horn has never been to the playoffs. He's never had to face off against Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and some of the best quarterbacks in the league in the most vital times of the season. Dane Jackson, at least, has that experience. And so far, he has impressed me when I've been out there to watch him. And I thought he looked pretty good in that preseason game. Granted, only face off against the Patriots first team for 2 series. And also the Pats receivers aren't very good, but he held his own. Played well, did like to see that. Behind that, though, a lot of questions. Troy Hill, more of a nickel guy, not an outside corner. They drafted Cha Smith-Wade out of Washington State, but he feels like somebody who's a nickel in the future and not really someone that they brought in this year expecting a whole lot out of. It was going to be DiCaprio Bootle, Deshaun Jameson. Those are the primary guys you're looking at. And so far, some of Lamar Jackson has stepped up. A practice squad guy from a year ago, someone who last week Dave Canales said he wanted to see him perform in the preseason game, and boy, did he, as he was one of the standouts defensively and just overall in that game last Thursday night in New England. So seeing how he's performed, how Boodle's played, even Deshaun Jameson actually played well in the preseason game, and he's had his moments so far, it makes you feel better about that unit. You can go back to last season when Boodle and Jameson had to step in, the Panthers were fine when they had to have some of those backup secondary guys play. And even talking about someone at safety, not same position group, like Alex Cook as well, you have seen that in this unit, this defense that Aguero runs, that the secondary can really shine, even if you're not having your top guys. So corner looks like it's in a better spot today than it was a couple weeks ago heading into training camp. Outside linebacker, I know Eku Leota played well. I didn't think DJ Johnson really did all that great. Luigi Vallan was somebody also who Ejiro Evero pointed out as someone who's really appreciated his development when speaking to us on Monday. There is still a large concern there because DJ Wonnum, who the Panthers signed to be their starting edge rusher opposite of Jadeveon Clowney, well, he was here even before Clowney. He's currently not healthy, and we don't know when he's going to be healthy. Same thing when you look at Amari Barno. He is currently not healthy. It's an issue of health more so than overall talent, even though I still question the overall talent in that room. I think that they still should be looking at trying to bring somebody in. They brought in Kamoko Toure. He gets injured, which is the theme there at that outside linebacker position. They should still be interested in those guys that are available. Corner, I still feel like they should be interested. Now, you bring up offensive tackle and center. I talked about this. I think it was a big overreaction when looking at how the tackles played. There, Traore, who started at tackle last Thursday, he's not going to make the team. Ricky Lee, also someone who's going to have a tough time making the team after the way he performed last week, and he was going to be fighting for the 9th spot on the offensive line with Chandler Zavala. So we're not talking about two guys that are going to be the first guys called up. Josh Nijman, who currently is a long ways away, according to Panthers head coach Dave Canales, from being ready to go, he would be that backup. So would Brady Christensen, who really is their 6th offensive lineman. I look at Christensen and Nijman as the true backup tackles. So I'm not overly concerned about that position group and the depth there. Now, center, Cade Mays, 3rd-year player, hasn't really played that position. He got an opportunity last week to play it. Then he got hurt. He now has that sprain in his AC joint in his shoulder. That is a position where, yeah, they should be looking for a backup center. Brady Christensen could play that. They liked Mays more in that role than Christensen. But again, Brady is their 6th offensive lineman, so they can throw him out there in that position if they feel like that is what's best for this team. I would have more concern about that depth there than I would have for offensive tackle. And then I would also have from cornerback. But outside linebacker, it's just these guys have not been healthy. I do see the Panthers management seeing offensive tackle as an area they had to address as they brought in 2 offensive linemen since that preseason game. But these aren't guys who are expected to be true contributors. And at center, they haven't done anything so far. We'll see how that works out down the road. Christensen probably going to get more reps. I did not see him at center. It was Andrew Rame, who is the undrafted free agent out of Oklahoma, who was getting those snaps to the second team when I was out of practice on Monday. So I do see your concerns about depth in certain spots. I don't necessarily agree with all of them, as I just said there. Mark, Jake, he says, Julian, I know injuries are never ideal, but might it actually be a blessing in disguise that our veteran tight ends are banged up? Feel like tight end is one of the major development positions, and JT Sanders getting so many reps is good for his overall development. Considering he's the future at the position, is this short-term pain worth the potential long-term gain? I do think it is, now that Tommy Tremble is back out at practice. Now, Dave did say that he's not expect him to practice against the Jets on Thursday. We'll see whether that is the case or not. Expectations don't always turn into reality, as we all know, as being sports fans and having watched this team for the last couple of years. Expectations, oftentimes, certainly here in Carolina, do not turn into the reality of our situations here in Charlotte. Now, him being back, that's good. Ian Thomas working his way back. It will be, in a way, a game time decision leading up to week 1, just based off what Dave Canales said about a week ago about Ian Thomas's status. Spawn Sullivan's no longer here. You have Jacob Hollister now, Jordan Matthews, but really getting to see JT Sanders get a ton of snaps in that preseason game. And even had Trimble and Thomas been available, JT Sanders was going to get those first team reps anyways against New England. But the fact that he's getting those in practice, the fact that come Thursday he's going to get the face off into Jets as the top tight end with Jordan Matthews, who I talked about on yesterday's show as also being someone who's benefiting from the fact that Ian Thomas and Tommy Trimble aren't out there right now. I do agree with you, Jake, that it's only going to accelerate and further his development, that being for JT Sanders. that he is getting these snaps with the ones, and he's being able to develop that relationship with the offensive line, with his quarterback, Bryce Young. Now, it's unfortunate that in the preseason game with Jack Plummer playing quarterback and the offensive line really struggling at the tackle spots, as Mark brought up, that he wasn't targeted and that the guys that were targeted didn't catch the football. My hope is that he'll get some targets on Thursday and also come Saturday in that preseason game against the Jets. But I'm happy that he's at least out there, he's healthy, and he is getting an opportunity to grow in a position that you rightfully bring up is one that takes a lot of time to develop. And I'm kind of coming back around and thinking to myself, maybe I shouldn't put so many expectations on JT Sanders this year. This is a guy that down the road absolutely can help them. And finally, I think still be that replacement that Greg Olsen, the Panthers, have been looking for over the last 5 or so years since Greg left Carolina. All right, let's take a quick pause to come back, and I'll answer more of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But with the playoffs over, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. And now that the Olympics are also over, we have less sports, but the preseason, it is here. And my hope is we'll get to see the starters this week. But either way, preseason football is back. You have Major League Baseball, college football next Saturday. It's back here. But whether the sports are sportsing like I want them to, FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Let's get back into it. The weekly Wednesday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. Either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for next Wednesday's edition of the show. And sticking to the theme of position groups and depth here in Carolina as we are in week 2 of the preseason. Joint practice with the Jets happening tomorrow on Thursday. Jordan asked, what position group do you have the most faith in going into this season? Let me think about this. Quarterback, still need to see it. I believe Bryce Young can be a good player for the Panthers. He can be their quarterback of the future, but still not going to say have the most faith in that happening. Running back, I do like Chuba. Miles Sanders certainly can't be as bad as he was a year ago. Receiver, not going to say I have the most faith in that group for sure. Tight end, definitely don't. Offensive line could be a contender. Defensive line has gotten better. Maybe safety. And Ajero Barrero brought this up on Monday that he sees 3 guys that are starters in that room. Xavier Woods, most underrated player on the team here in Carolina. Maybe that's beginning to change as more people start banging the drum for him being a really good player, as he was a top 10 safety in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus a year ago. Jordan Fuller, I think he's a solid player. Been a starter last couple years in LA. He's been durable, just like Xavier Woods has been. And then Nick Scott, yes, he struggled a year ago in Cincinnati, but that's a different scheme than the one he's playing in now, the one that he was familiar with when he was over in LA with Ajero Barrero as his position coach. Then Alex Cook, a guy that they signed off the Giants practice squad last year, started a couple games for them. He also looked really damn good in that preseason game. If there's a position group that I'm looking at have the most faith in, it's got to be the safeties, just based off of knowing that this scheme is one that really accentuates the talent that you have there in the secondary at that position group, especially, and having guys that have experience starting the league, even if they may have other struggles like last year with Scott, and then another one and Alex Cook who can step up and play for him. And I think possibly could be one of the future players at that position down the road, as all 3 of the 3 starters that they have, according to Ajero Barrero, they're all going to be free agents after the season. I like that group. I think it's a solid group. And you have concerns about corner. I don't think you should have concerns at all about safety heading into the season. And there is some solid depth there as well. Kyle also asking about position groups heading into, I guess, the season, but also just looking at things right now during the final days of camp and heading to preseason game number 2. He asked which position group or groups in question needs a breakout star this year. Are there a few diamonds in the rough that could turn into the next Frankie Louvu-esque player? And now, if you think about a player who kind of feels a lot like that. Leota gave a lot of effort on Thursday night. He looked awesome, and he is somebody that last year the staff really liked, and understand that that's the same staff defensively that's here again this year, and a big reason why he stuck around, the former undrafted free agent a year ago out of Auburn. He looked better than DJ Johnson. He looked like the second best edge rusher on this team, considering that we haven't really got to see a lot of Clowney. Now we get to see a ton of Clowney on Thursday during joint practices with the Jets, and Jets have more of a reworked offensive line. So interested to see what he looks like against them coming up on Thursday morning for practice. But Leota, that may be a diamond in the rough as one of those undrafted free agent kind of players. Thinking about it too, like as far as like the position group that you need a breakout star from, like wide receiver, of course, would be great. Deontay Johnson, there's expectations for, so I don't think you can call him a breakout star. Same thing with Adam Thielen. Like if Xavier Legette comes back healthy from that foot scare and he is awesome, that would be the position I'm thinking about. Running back, you could call Chuba a breakout star, but we know Chuba's right there on the cusp of being a pretty good player. Maybe that's a breakout season for him. I don't know, but I think the Panthers will be able to run the football pretty well with the offensive line and with Chuba and even Miles Sanders back there after his struggles. And then we'll see what Jonathan Brooks is able to give once he's back healthy. Tight end would be great if JT Sanders can be that breakout star. I don't know if that's fair to expect that out of him this year. Defensive line, they already have their guy. They got Derek Brown. It'd be nice to just the other guys just be solid players. They don't need to be breakout stars. Corner, I mean, Dane Jackson turned out to be a breakout star. I think that's great for Carolina as well. But really, I would look at outside linebacker if they can get somebody. Clowney, we know what he is and what he can be. There's not really anything that's going to change about him moving forward as he's in the twilight of his career. Anyways, like one of them's injured right now. Like if DJ Johnson becomes that breakout star, I think that's probably one of the best things that could happen for this team. Aside from, I mean, I guess Bryce being a breakout star, that would be the number one thing. And then like Xavier Legette would be probably number 2. And then like 2B to Legette being 2A would be DJ Johnson or anyone really stepping up and all of a sudden having like a double-digit sack season out of nowhere. Like that would be the position group I'm looking at outside of a wide receiver as far as a diamond in the rough and also just a position group that needs a breakout star. I think outside linebacker, wide receiver, and, quarterback could really use a breakout star this season in Carolina. All right, let me take a quick pause again. I'll come back and answer the rest of your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip a leg day or a therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. A few more questions before we get out of here on this weekly Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers. Over to Kurt, who asked, he says first, Bryce Young last season threw for 2,877 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Based on what you've seen so far, how would you rank the likeliness of these stats for him this season? Over 3,000 yards passing, over 20 touchdowns, under 10 interceptions. Well, let's start off with the passing yards. If Bryce Young threw for 2,877 passing yards last year with really only Adam Thielen as a reliable receiver, and now you're putting Deontay Johnson in there, yeah, I feel pretty confident that he's going to get that. So if we're going to do a scale to like 0 to 10, it's out of 10 that's going to happen. They just play too many games. They throw too often for quarterbacks to not be able to do that. So Bryce Young, you have to see. The offense has to be terrible up front. The receivers have to be terrible. The quarterback also has to not be playing very well because of that, and also his own issues for you get stats like you got last year passing yardage-wise, not throw for at least 3,000 yards in today's NFL. So, yeah, I feel at a level 10 that's going to happen. Touchdowns going from 11 to 20. I still feel pretty good about it. I would put that at like a 7 out of 10 as far as this scale goes. Getting Deontay Johnson, having another reliable receiver, better protection up front. You would think with the new offensive line. Now, they want to run the ball a lot. I get that. I do think that we're going to get to see more passing touchdowns. I think he can get to 20. So I'm going to say 7 out of 10. Now, under 10 interceptions, that's the one thing where they're not going to throw it as much as they did last year. Bryce is also going to learn after going through last season. And it's not like he was a high interception guy in college anyways. I don't know how confident I am in him throwing less than 10. I'll put that at like 5. So there we go. So I'm very confident that he'll have over 3,000. Pretty confident he'll have over 20, or at least get to 20. And kind of like middle of the road when it comes to the 10 interceptions. It may be less because of the fact that they want to be more of a ground and pound team, which then you can ask, well, wouldn't that result in less passing touchdowns and passing yards? Potentially, but I still feel more confident about that than, interceptions. They happen. But yeah, so there we go. Last question comes from JP. Are the Panthers wide receivers actually having good camp, or do they simply look good compared to a lackluster DB room? But as we talked about earlier from Mark's question, I'm liking what I'm seeing at safety. I think corner so far has been a pleasant surprise, especially depth-wise, and the guys that aren't named J.C. Horn in that room. Deontay Johnson, every time I'm out there, is making a play. Adam Thielen, he's looked pretty good too. It feels like hell half the time I've been out there that Adam's actually had a vet day. So we'll see more so on Thursday against the Jets what Adam looks like, and especially Deontay, as he's going to be going up against Sauce Gardner a ton. So excited to see those guys get after it. Everyone else, though, Mingo looked good. Preseason game, nothing happened. Terrace Marshall in shorts looked good. Pads went on. Didn't really look all that great. We saw didn't make a catch in the preseason game. There's 2 guys at wide receiver that are having a good camp. Everyone else, it's still you want. Mingo's had a good camp. He has. But you still want more consistency in the game, even at practice. And the hope is that you'll see it on Thursday and you'll see it next on Saturday and even maybe Saturday this Saturday and then next Saturday when they face off against Buffalo and, of course, the Jets this upcoming weekend. So, yeah. 2 guys, Johnson, Thielen, having good camps. Mingo's had a good camp. And everyone else just moments, but not the kind of consistency that you need and want to see so far here in Carolina. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back with you next Wednesday to answer your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding it on tomorrow's show. I'll get you ready for what's going to happen at joint practice on Thursday and what I'll be watching out for when I'm down there at camp. So we'll talk to you there on Thursday or Wednesday, Thursday, whatever day it is here on Locked On Panthers.